Hello, and welcome to Town Meeting TV's coverage of Town Meeting Day 2023. My name is Bobby Lucier, and I'll be your host for tonight's program as we take a look at the proposed budget for the Champlain Valley School District. This program is one in a series of forums we're hosting in advance of Town Meeting Day this year, in which we invite candidates and municipal officials to unpack the items and races that you'll see up and down your ballot this March. So we'll dive in just a second, but before we get started, if you're tuning in live, just so you know, we welcome your questions anytime at 802-862-3966. That's 802-862-3966. You can give us a call and we'll hear your question live on air. So with that, I'd now like to introduce our representatives from the Champlain Valley School District who are going to walk us through the proposed budget tonight. Here in the studio, we have Gary Marcris, the Chief Operations Officer for the district. We have Renee Sanchez, who is the Superintendent of the district, and Angela Arsenault, who is the Chair of the CVSD Board. So thank you all so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome. And Angela, I'm going to hand it right over to you to tell us a bit about this budget and what voters and families can expect to see this year.
All right. Well, thank you. First of all, I do want to say a sincere thank you for having us here. You know, getting the word out about the budget is one of the most important things we do as a board, and working with the administration to come up with that budget is, you know, some of our it's kind of the foundational work of a school board. So having opportunities like this to talk about it is really important. So thank you for providing that opportunity. I'm not going to do a lot of the talking this evening because we have our experts with us in Superintendent Sanchez and COO Marcris. But I just want to say that we'll be rolling through some slides so that folks will have a couple ways to see and hear the information. And, you know, kind of that, we'll start with our mission, which is something that we hope people see often in our school district and understand that we work very deeply to live up to this mission, and the budget is a reflection of that mission. So you can see it here on your screens. I think the mission is to develop citizens who learn actively and collaboratively, think creatively and critically, live responsibly and respectfully, contribute positively to their community, and pursue excellence. We've also got what I would love to have Superintendent Sanchez say a few words about. How do you describe this?
So these are our priorities. So you'll see in this graphic, this is something that we worked on as a leadership team this summer over the course of the year in preparation for going into this year. And so what we recognize is that our priorities really needed to focus on academic growth and belonging. And so academic growth and belonging can mean a lot of things, but we knew that at the core of it is really teaching and learning. And then when it comes to serving all of our students and all of our teachers, we know that we also have to look outside of teaching and learning and take into consideration identity, connection, direction, and proficiency, so that way we have some guideposts along the way for these priorities.
Yeah, and we've been coming back to that, those priorities all year as a board, and again, an opportunity to share that as often as possible with the community is really helpful. So just a quick, I'll say a little bit behind the budget maybe. What's behind the budget are what we call our board budget goals. We really we task our administrators with developing a budget that first supports the implementation of the mission and vision. The vision, both are currently a work in progress, which is a little bit of an aside. If you ever want to talk about our strategic plan, we can do that too. But
if we have time at the end.
Yeah, that's something we're working on. So the board also focuses on meeting or exceeding education quality standards, also known as EQS. We always want to be mindful of implementing any initiatives, new initiatives, which we will get to, but this year we don't really have so much, and we'll just can talk more about why that is. We implement and continue to improve the budget process really with a focus on community input. It has to be our community's budget. And sometimes talking about a budget isn't the most interesting thing, understandably, but it's important for very clear and obvious reasons, and we always welcome community input, and we want to integrate that community input as much as possible. And finally, again, focusing on the community, we want to do all of this and build a budget that our communities can support.
So our budget work really is year-round. So we're hoping that come town meeting day that our budget passes, but as soon as that budget passes, we're on to the next component of next year's budget. So beginning in May and this summer, we'll start having meetings, aligning our goals to what our expectations are for next year. But within those goals, we know that we want to be able to measure them, meaning we're going to have to figure out, are these goals sufficient? And if they are, then we need to make sure that we're going to fund them properly moving into the future. So we'll take feedback from the principals, we'll take feedback from the community, we'll make sure that we're monitoring our quarterly statements so that way we can see if we're on track or if we need to cut back or we're allowed to be able to do a few more things within the budget this year. And then one of the things that we really enjoy is when we have events for the public to provide us the feedback that we need. This year, as we were doing our strategic plan feedback sessions, we incorporated information about the budget so that way people could understand that as we were planning for our strategic plan, that it was also at the same time, if this is what we want to do, we have to be able to fund it as well. So this next slide talks about our American Rescue Plan Esser funding. So due to COVID, we received, and lots of other districts in Vermont received 3 distributions of Esser funds. And so we are on Esser 3 now, and we have that money for 1 more year and 1 more summer. And so what we are planning on using this money for is to make sure that we're recovering from the pandemic. And the goal is to make sure that we are able to spend this money, about $4.3 million. And we want to make sure that we're spending it on the things that the students need, whether it's academic recovery or making sure that we have personnel on the campuses to help the students feel like they belong, feel like they're able to readjust to coming back to school. So it's not going to recover, or the amount of money that we received is not going to cover everything, but we're trying to find out what the best practices are so that way, if we need to, we can continue it out of our general fund or we can seek other grants. So like every year, we're going to have some components of a budget that are, kind of good things and some things that aren't so good. So, and what we've done is we've summed it up this year in our budget headwinds and tailwinds. So the headwinds that we're facing, many of which everybody else in Vermont and almost across the country are facing. So inflation, a tight labor market, the rising cost of healthcare, and the disappearance or shrinking of grant funds. But at the same time, we also have some good things going on as well. So between the strategic plan and an equity audit that we had last year and our planning for this year, we've really begun to align our district goals to create a coherent plan for moving into the future so that way we are efficient in our spending. We also have a very talented and committed workforce. We're very fortunate that we have wonderful teachers and staff and administrators to help support our students on a daily basis. And we're excited that they like to come to work every day and that they support our students. And then finally, we know that our Act 173 implementation, that's effectively where we got our academic growth and belonging language from. We have planned for that already, so we are our budget is allocated for it already. So Esser 3, as I mentioned earlier, is currently in effect. We're in its last year. We want to make sure that we are utilizing it for the COVID recovery, largely through counseling and social work. This year is going to be the last year. We will have a little bit of money in the summer to help support high school and its activities. Act 173 is in effect now. So we've transitioned the special ed funding from one of a reimbursement to more of a census funding. So we were fortunately positioned well. So we didn't have, we are not going to lose money. We're actually making almost $600,000 as a result of the transition. And then, but one of the things that we know that is coming pretty soon is Act 127, which is the weighting study that University of Vermont and the legislature did a few years back. And so we have to be prepared for that. So we know that going into this year, day one after town meeting, we will be meeting to discuss what the impact is going to mean for us, and it will come into implementation in fiscal year 25, which is not this coming year, but the year after. So I guess Angela alluded to it earlier, that we didn't really add much. We made sure our school board asked us to keep it in the same ballpark effectively. Don't add a whole lot. If you have to add, you're going to have to find the money within the budget that exists already. So we do have some instructional program budget neutral enhancements. So as I mentioned earlier, we had an equity audit, and our equity audit is recommending that we focus more on data, we focus more on communications, really make sure that we are aligning what diversity, equity, and inclusion means to everyone in the district, but then also to recruit, hire, retain, and develop a high-quality, diverse staff. So we know that we're going to have to do some extra work, but in order to meet those expectations, but we have it in the budget so that we can. We have reallocated some of our K-8 essential arts programs so that to take into account that essentially equitable funding across the district. So if we had a school that had a little bit more and another school had a little bit less, we want to make sure that based on student population and the demographics of that student population, we were able to make it more equitable. And again, no significant programmatic or staffing changes as a result.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that we've kind of shifted into an equality-based budget where like each school got the same amount of resources for the number of students that they had in their school to more of a need-based where we're targeting our resources toward the needs where they are. So our operations budget highlights, other than the impact of inflation on the operations budget, we did not increase that part of our organization's funding. Our operations budget covers facilities, maintenance and operations of the facilities, our transportation system, which is quite large, and we're one of the few districts regionally that own their own fleet of buses. So that's a big part of that budget. Our food service, technology, and the administration of the central office. So this is kind of a year-to-year review. This is how we got from a little over an $89 million budget to just a little over a $96 million budget. And they're broken down by categories. Here, SPED means special education. And we kind of separate these out so they're more easy to understand. We don't want to double count things or make things confusing. So the $2 million listed here is salaries without special education. Health insurance is another place that increased about $1 million, totally beyond the district control. That's a statewide healthcare system. And it increased by 12.7% for fiscal year 24. Other benefits like dental, life, long-term disability, there's a fairly significant increase in costs there. Our supplies, materials, and energy kind of went up like the CPI did, around 7% is our estimated cost. We used 6% where we could, and then the actual data for the energy sector to build our budget. Our debt service, our annual debt service, it went up. The short-term borrowing interest rate increase caused that to go up by about $62,000 for FY24. And then special education, which is a big part of our increase, and that's excluding the health insurance, because we included that all in one tranche, just for explanation purposes. That went up over $2.5 million, 2.6 actually. And really it's a result of our service plan where we plan a need-based budget for our special education services. And we have found for sure statewide that since the pandemic started in 2020, the need for special education and additional supports has increased tremendously. Coming back, it was a very difficult time for all of America and our actually all the world, but our children in CVSD are experiencing the challenges of reintegrating and making up for educational loss. So again, we'll look at equalized tax rate. This is prior to the common level of appraisal. This is, some call it the base tax rate. So in FY23, it was $1.39. So, and there's a formula by the $100 of home value, you multiply the base tax rate to get your base tax liability. So that from FY23 to FY24, it actually decreased by 9.3 cents for the Champlain Valley School District. So that's the good news. With our expenditures increasing by 7.5%, with all the factors that we talked about in the headwinds and headwinds part of the previous slide, our tax rate still decreased, the base tax rate, by 9.3 cents. This, comparatively, the budget from a base tax rate is about 1.2% below the statewide average for spending per equalized pupil, and about 1% below the statewide average for a spending increase. Okay, so that is the positive side of the story. The difficulty and the challenging part from a taxpayer, from a citizen standpoint, property owner standpoint, is that the common level of appraisal, which the common level of appraisal tries to equalize what everybody pays proportionally across the state based on the value of their property that they're paying their tax liability against. And that, for all of our towns except St. George, significantly increased the actual tax rate. Because the property values have gone up so rapidly, especially 21, 22, and so far into 23, the appraised value of those homes are undervalued compared to the sales, actual sales in the market across Vermont and across our towns. So to equalize that, they put this equalization factor, and they decreased significantly from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 24. So those decreases, if your home is only worth appraised at 77, 78, 80% of the actual sales value, to equalize that, you have to use that percentage as a divisor against that base rate, which increases the base rate. So in the end, our estimated tax rates, you can see them with CLA applied in the center column. From that $1.30 base rate, they've all gone up, 20 to 40, almost 40 cents. So that equates to, in most of our towns, we had 2 towns with a 5% change from fiscal year 23. One, Shelburne, with a 6% increase from 23. St. George did decline a little bit. They, I believe, had an appraisal more recently. And then Williston only increased 2%. And you can see that translated into the dollar value change per $100,000 of assessed value on the right-hand side. So we had some favorable conditions pre-CLA, but the home values did increase tax rates in 4 of the 5 towns.
Is that last column there, that's the change in the tax burden, or that's the change in the appraisal value?
Nope, that's the change in the tax burden per $100,000 of property assessed value.
Thanks, Mary.
So in summary, the budget that we've presented shows our continuation of commitment to our CVSD students. And so there are these factors that we've had to take into consideration for the presentation of this budget. So we've mentioned that there was significant inflation, about 7% for energy, goods and services, the mandated health insurance increase of about 12.7%, and then the competitive labor market driving needed salary increases across all positions. And so that is the result of going from $89 million to $96 million. That being said, we used to be a supervisory union prior to 2018, and so we had 6 or 7 districts just within our purview. Since then, we've consolidated, and each year since 2018, our tax rate has consistently gone down. So even though our tax rates are significant this year, they would be even higher if we were still a supervisory union.
So we can shift a little bit into the articles that will also appear on ballots that people will be seeing either in the ballot box or early voting, which we can all do now, which is really great. I guess we always could, but it's more common now. We do have an informational meeting that folks can check out on March 6th at 5 p.m. That is on Zoom, I believe. And we'll talk about the articles at that meeting, but if we have a couple minutes, we can get into them a little bit now. So we have Article 7, which is the budget. That's the big one, and it's written out very clearly on the ballot, so folks can be sure of what they're voting on. And then we have Article 8, which is asking the voters if if we can spend some of our fund balance to draw down. Well, we have to draw down the fund balance and apply it to revenue, which keeps the budget, just that much lower. And then Article 9, folks in our district might be very familiar with this. I think it's an annual request to purchase replacement school buses. This year, I believe it's three buses. See, I told you they're the experts. But that is something that we have, and Gary could talk about this, but it's an annual...
A life cycle replacement plan.
Usually around 12 years.
Life cycle replacement plan, I like that. All right, tucking that away. And I will let Gary share the good news about the property tax credit.
So I will say that many Vermonters don't pay taxes based on the value of their property, or at least the full value of their property. So this is last year's data. I don't believe that the ceiling has been updated for this year. I believe the legislature will set that later in the session. But as a general rule, if you make less than $138,500 in household income, you're eligible for the Vermont Property Tax Credit Program, which you pay based on a percentage of your income as opposed to the full value of your property. At tax time, when you file, there is some required 2 documents that you have to file, a homestead declaration, and I can't remember the title of the other one. But if you qualify based on income and you file those, you can get a credit on your property taxes, which can really significantly lower your tax liability. And the link is here for the property tax credit, and it's on the state website.
And so, as I said, we do have our annual informational meeting coming up on Monday, March 6th, which many people will recognize as the day before town meeting. It's 5 p.m. at CVU.
I think it's hybrid.
And
It's
I
hybrid.
think, we'll be offering that on Zoom as well. All of this information is also available on the district website. Maybe is that coming up? cvsdvt.org. No harm in saying it twice.
Yep.
And as I said, you can vote on or before March 7th. And if you're interested in requesting a ballot, you do have to request a ballot. And remember that school budget ballots are separate from town ballots. So you have to contact your town clerk or go to mvpvermont.gov to request your ballot online. But I think that's an important point to reiterate, that there are two separate ballots, and in order to get both, I believe you have to talk to your town clerk. Then I was going to ask if you wanted to lead us out, or
Yeah, absolutely. I think that about wraps it up. We have maybe a couple minutes left. If you have anything quickly you'd like to highlight about work going on in the school district. Otherwise, we can wrap it up, but I'll share a little bit of space to highlight anything that you're working on right now before we close out.
Sure. Also on our website, if you go to our strategic planning page, you'll see that we've got our draft strategic plan up on the website right now, and we're asking for community members and teachers and students to provide us feedback as we get closer to presenting it to the school board as a final draft later on this semester. So if you have time, please go to our website, cvsdvt.org.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Renee. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Angela, for joining us tonight. And thank you for tuning into Town Meeting TV's ongoing coverage of Town Meeting Day 2023, where you'll continue to see ongoing coverage of local candidates, ballot items, and budgets in advance of this year's Town Meeting Day. You can find this forum and others on our website, ch17.tv, or on our Town Meeting TV YouTube channel. Thanks so much for tuning in, and have a wonderful night.